Hiro.
Hi, Vic.
Hi, Hiro. How are you?
Good.
So, but you should be part of the symposium also. Why?
I wish. I really do. I just feel pulled in so many different directions right now, Vic.
It's just 1 hour. 1 hour is all I ask. What?
But it sounds like you have already, what, 70 speakers or something?
Yeah, it's about 74, I think now.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's going to happen over many days, it sounds like.
Basically Wednesdays and Thursdays throughout August and September.
I see. And we have another mediator, Vikram, here joining us.
Yes. No, that's me. That's on my mobile. Supposing this for any reason fails, I have a backup there. So that's on my mobile data. This is on my Wi-Fi. Just, I mean, in case it doesn't normally happen, but the thing is, it just grew. I mean, I just thought I'll have a few speakers and we'll do it over 1 month.
Yes.
But it was good, very good response. And I said, let's not leave anyone out, because now
I saw that.
I mean, 35 plus countries to get a view from all these places.
Yeah.
I think it should be very interesting.
And they'll all be recorded, right?
Yes, all is recorded. It's on the YouTube channel. So, I mean, we have Brunei on one end, we have Morocco, we have Mali, we have, I mean, of course, North America, South America is covered, parts of Europe. I mean, I'm happy with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan.
Really? Wow. That'll be very, very interesting. I mean, I'm also interested in this kind of comparative work in mediation. Part of my research on the academic plane has been to look at mediation legislation around the world. And so, mediation is really developing in all corners of the world. As in many of the countries that you've mentioned are not countries that people immediately think of when they think of mediation internationally, but there are mediation initiatives, everywhere, really. And so it'd be very interesting to know how mediation is developing in these different pockets of the world.
The interesting thing that I'm trying to bring out through the symposium is that a lot of people think of a certain process and they say it's mediation, but it turns out that this was arbitration. And I'm talking about in the culture of these places. I mean, I give this example. We had an opening session, and of course that's recorded. You will hear it there also. That I was talking to someone from Kazakhstan, and I said, let's just do a quick Google search, Kazakhstan mediation. So there, I think, there's one institution in the US. They have this Kazakhstan section in it, and says there's something called BIYS, BEES. BEES does mediation. So I asked him, look, you have had this culture. He said that's a Sharia court. They give decisions. So this is the misconception that is spread around. For me, I'll tell you what the important thing is. I want to spread this down to the village level, because it has to start from the grassroots. Now, if I go there and I tell them that this process about, this is mediation. In the case of Kazakhstan is BEES. In India, the panchayat. If I use the word panchayat, the first thing that'll strike them is the decision of the panchayat. There's a decision they give. They'll think this is, I mean, what is the difference? Now we have a mediator who will give a decision. Up till now, we elected a person as a panchayat member. So they'll be confused and it won't get anywhere. So I'm trying to bring that out. And then as we move forward, at least with the whole concept of mediation as pure mediation, people should understand.
Yes.
And the thing that about arbitrators doing mediation and that aspect also needs to go out. I mean, those are the things. Slowly, there is time. There is enough time.
Yes, of course. No, it's great. I mean, a lot of this about education, really, and changing people's mindsets, right? And bringing new ideas and new information to people. And so it's wonderful that you are really taking the laboring oar and spreading this information globally.
And you are part of it, Hiro. You have to be part of this. Only issue that we will have a conflict is on the aspect of the law. Like in India, you've been part of the committee and I'm on the other side. Obviously, I have my issue. Whatever I feel on this. So what I do is I don't talk about it. I speak to Mr. Panchu. I told Mr. Panchu, look, these are my thoughts, because he's one of those people. He will, of course, put it across if he has to in a manner. He knows how to do it. With me, I'll get passionate about it.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, there are lots of things to get passionate about, I think, with mediation. And there are many different approaches and views about mediation too. And so, that's all very interesting. I mean, what's brewing right now in India? Because India, I think, is a jurisdiction that many people are watching closely in terms of mediation developments,
You're
right?
going to yeah. You're getting me into a conversation which okay, I'll put my view across to you, and you're also the sort who will. I mean, you won't react to it because I'm a little this thing. Okay, for
Yeah.
me, the point is we have the best legal position right now. You want a contract at the end of a mediation, nothing, there is no law on it, you're not required. You do find whoever you want as a mediator, you do it, and you've got a contract at the end of it. Perfect. No regulation required, nothing required. But I've been even in the symposium, I don't know whether you saw the theme, I don't know whether I sent it to you. The concept was that I am starting off with the definition in the Singapore Convention, because for me it's broad enough and very well put across. I mean, the point is that first of all, whatever the name you call it. Second, however you do the process. The important thing is that the person or persons should not have an authority to impose a decision on you. That's it. So very nicely put there. So I say I'm starting from there, and I'm saying, look, this is what the situation is. That if you want to find whoever you want, whatever way the process has to happen, no words required, no names required, nothing. The point is just assisting the parties to reach an amicable settlement. That's the whole idea behind it. So you call it whatever. So, but if you want a court decree at the end of it, we have a very good law on conciliation, which provides for certain standards, it provides for confidentiality, it provides for without prejudice, which a lot of countries are still struggling with. I mean, the US itself is struggling with that aspect. So we've got a law which protects everything. At the end of the day, that settlement agreement is as good as an arbitral award, a consent award. So now the advantage of that, and it had to go through that route, was because at the end of the day, enforcement, when the court comes for enforcement to the court, at least the court should have some criteria why they should not enforce the settlement agreement. You can't tell the court you have to do it because we signed it. So everything that applies to setting aside an arbitral award applies to this. So you've got a whole framework there. With the Singapore Convention, they put out separate things, what you need to check before enforcing a settlement agreement. Perfect. That can be changed accordingly. I mean, the settlement agreement can directly be a court decree rather than going through the route of an arbitral award. I mean, perfectly all right. It makes no difference. And you'll have more specific things to write there. No issue. But the point is, the framework that we have today is the best in the world. I keep saying that. And on the other end, in India, like you're asking me the India position, I hear people on webinars that India doesn't have a law on mediation. So the first point is that what is mediation? For me, the definition is very nicely put in that. The other thing that if you see the UNCITRAL model law that they have, 2018, they very specifically have said that conciliation is the word we were using earlier. Now we see in the world, mediation is the word that is widespread. So now we are going to use the word mediation, and it is the same thing. There is no difference between the two. They've said it themselves, but people are still going around this conciliation, mediation, potato. At the end of the day, look, for me, how I am going about it. So large corporates adapt. I'll just introduce you to Prabhat. 1 second, I'll just do that. But before that, I'm just finish this aspect. On one end, we have to have the large corporates taking it up. Definitely, because that's the trickle down will come from there. If a large organization says, look, we are doing this, so that I started that process. So I have a person, a legal head of a large company who maybe we made one video, but we're going to make a maybe I will let me say a better one. We're making that, so we'll put that into the corporate world. But the problem is, where are the mediators? You can do what you like. So that is why this whole global pool I'm trying to create, because there is so much work that has to come out of India, but if the user experience is not good, where are we going to go with it? It's just going to be one-off thing. You do it, and they don't have the user experience is bad, and say they go on criticizing it. So both the things have to go hand in hand. So that's how it is.
So it sounds like you're a little bit worried about over-regulating or tinkering too much with the existing framework. You think the framework in India is pretty good as it is. There's no need really for additional legislation.
The best in the world. I always use this terminology, best in the world. According to me, I mean, nothing else you need to do. Anything else you will do, you will only something that is still at the stage when people just might adopt it. Although imagine in 1996, we have this law. And if people don't even talk about it, and no one, who's going to talk about it? Finally, the lawyers have to tell people that, okay, you're coming here, why don't you try and settle it and under conciliation, and you have a settlement agreement which is as good as a court degree. Sitting in a village, I mean, imagine, you look, you know the size of India, you've seen how what the conditions are. The high court in a state might be 1,000 kilometers away from a village of someone. He might go there for a hearing, nothing will happen, he'll have to go back again. 1,000 kilometers this way, 1,000 kilometers. He's not flying in there. He's taking a local bus to one place. He gets another bus or train to another place. I mean, the kind of things people have to go through, and nothing happens at the end of the day. That this whole concept of hearings, overhearing. There is a Hindi movie. There's a dialogue. I mean, I'm translating it. Of course, it's in Hindi. But date after date after date, he keeps talking about. He's like so entrenched into the system, and he's going through this. The hero of that movie. So, I mean, this is how bad the situation is. So, to have, if in a village you can get a court decree, what better can you have? I mean, how? But this has to be communicated. So now I'm starting that process. While I'm starting this process, on the other end, this law is being drafted. Now, where this law goes, I still feel though our government is smart enough to understand that, look, whatever suggestions you get, they have a larger view of the country. There might be people in the court system and institutions which have their way of looking at it. I mean, no one is wrong in their little view. It's an elephant. You can look at it whatever want. But I think our government has that larger view. So I don't think they will pick up whatever suggestions have come to them immediately. I think they will still, they're more objective. I see.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned this because, you know, as I spoke with people several years back, this was back in 2015, 2014 period, and there were discussions about, is there even a need for national legislation, right? And there were views exchanged, you know, both sides. And, you know, I think the consensus on the Indian side was, you know, that is necessary. But, you know, if you look at, for example, the experience in the US or the UK, there's no national mediation legislation in those countries, right? And still mediation has managed to take off in a really good way.
Yep.
So, you know, it might be that in different locales, different things are more important, you know, you know, it sounded like the consensus among the majority of the Indian lawyers we spoke with was that in India, there needed to be a national legislation. But, you know, who knows?
No, let me tell you, I am very clear about this, that lawyers in this country have a vested interest that mediation should not take off. It's very clear because I settled a matter which was lying in court for 14 years. The kind of money that those lawyers made on those 14 years, it got settled at nothing compared to what the cost they were spending. Even few hearings, you can imagine what our senior counsels are charging. I don't even think in the US they charge so much. The senior counsels, like we have Mr. Harish Salve, he charges something like $30,000 for a hearing. Can you imagine?
Wow.
So if these are the people on that end, I mean, I'm not saying Mr. Salve has any issue with the media. I'm not saying, I'm not giving an example that way, but they're lawyers sitting there and that's the kind of money they're charging. There are people who are running mediation centers who are senior counsels. The kind of hearing amount they charge for hearings there. On the other end of the mediation center that they're running, in that center, the person might get $10 a hearing a session. Total, they might get $1,000, $2,000, no, $200, $200 for the entire mediation. And, and on the other end, so I mean, where is there a vested interest? We have to look at that. Then who are the people giving suggestions? People in the court system or institutions? I mean, we have 1.3 billion people in this country. There are 43 million cases lying in courts. 18 million cases come into courts every year. Where are you going to get those people? Where are you going to do the accreditations? Where are you even thinking about it? I mean, are you going to, and who are the people who are going to train? Are they accredited?
Yeah, no, I hear you. There are going to be lots of challenges. It's really true.
No, you finish it off. I mean, no challenges. We'll just finish it off. I mean, the concept before it starts off, when we have everything going, we'll finish it. But let me introduce Prabhat is here.
Yes.
Prabhat, you want to say hi to Hiro?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Hiro. Lovely seeing you here.
Likewise. So Prabhat, we just connected on LinkedIn. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, just right.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, a few days ago, I sent you a link. Yeah.
Yes,
because I found your bio so impressive. I went through it, and I really wanted to be staying connected. I mean, we are connected thanks to Vikram, but despite that, just to have a personal connection. Yeah, it's wonderful, and I'm so looking forward to hearing you, hearing your views. And it was a nice conversation just now. And I think if I may,
Sure.
can I add a few thoughts of my own?
You can. This is totally an open conversation. This
Okay.
is look, there are other shows. No, before you go.
Prabhat, maybe you can tell me a little bit about you first before you start the conversation.
Oh, all right. Okay. So Hiro, I have got long experience, over 35 years in international business. So I have, and it's been across careers. I have got experience in business consulting, advertising, media, digital, and then on my own, of consulting for various industries. Since 2022, that's about now 20 years, I have been, after my career in work career, which was with international companies and involved with markets as diverse as the North America to Africa. So it's covered a very wide range of very advanced markets and the emerging markets across several industries. I started out on my own to assist Indian businesses identify opportunities in the international markets and expand their business. However, my focus area remained with managing businesses through FDI route, and that, of course, involved liaison with the governments, not just in India, even in the US. So I have been doing a lot of government relations work in India, of course, because a lot of companies who've been moving into India have taken my services. But during this entire course, I figured that my top skill was really mediating because, it was mediating in cross-culture conflicts, cross-business conflicts, and conflicts in particular with the government, because the industry comes from a certain orientation of profit making, and the government comes from a certain other orientation. For them, the exchequer is the most precious thing, and they must guard it. An exchequer is not just revenues, it's words, it's papers, it's documents. It goes to that level. So it's coincidental that, and I enjoyed it personally. So I didn't know at all that there was a career called mediation until about 4 or 5 years ago. One of my lawyer friends, he suggested that I could do mediation for him because it involved disputes in a certain contract, and that I would be in a better position to address it because I had the background. So I said, hey, listen, I mean, I've got no legal background. How the hell can I get into this? So he said, no. Please try to understand, it doesn't require legalities at all. Just look at it as a business problem and try to solve it. So I said, well, I'm always open for new things. So I went out and did that. And I did it fairly successfully. It concluded and they were very happy with it. So that one thing led to another and to another. And I got more and more engaged. And then I started realizing that, you did not need any kind of, mediation. Then I did research because then I recalled that how it existed in India for centuries. It has existed. And it has existed because there have been some people who had those skills, natural skills and traits to understand two perspectives and resolve conflicts and disputes between people, whether it is relating to lands or legacies or titles or just partnerships between two people. I'm sorry, I'm focused mostly on the commercial aspect, so I'm only giving examples of the commercial side of mediation. It has existed. Now, what is interesting, taking further from Vikram's view thought, he was talking about it. What I feel is let the government and the judiciary promote mediation, no matter how much they want to. The reality is that it's likely to gain back its place and position in the society as it used to, with a similar level of dignity and similar level of respect, if the business, the industry, the corporates begin to engage mediation in resolving conflicts. That's on the one side. Only then it can mobilize mediation. Yes. And the other part is the mediators are conscious about their responsibility to resolve disputes as a professional service. They aren't doing any charity there.
Yes.
It's a professional service they are giving.
Yes, that's right.
Because they have a certain know-how. Yeah. They have a certain capacity and capability. That's what they are bringing to the table. That must be respected. At the same time, the mediators have to be responsible enough to ensure that resolutions are done in a way that it leaves behind a wow element where the client says, hey, why didn't we think of that? Why did we spend so much of time going through litigation, disturbing our relationships, causing so much of anguish and angst, disrupt our relationships, which could have been more productive and more positive.
Prabha, I tell you what we'll do is we'll have, because this is a conversation with Hiro. But what happens with Prabhat, he's also as passionate. He's also as passionate. You ask him to ask a question, then his question will be one whole session of going through it. It was just a polite thing, Prabhat. He was just polite. Okay.
Yeah, but you've raised a lot of very interesting themes.
But we want to, but we want to hear you, Hiro. The idea is format is not. Format was not supposed to be people coming in actually, but Prabhat is quite this thing about it. A lot of other people felt they should come into the conversation. So we changed that, because what happens is that we want to hear you. And I mean, look, this is not evolution of a mediator. Evolution of a mediator, definitely we go into a lot into the childhood and growing up and all that. But this is not supposed to be that. I mean, that's not the idea, but a little bit, of course, because getting here and being a mediator, I mean, of course, you're doing other things also. But just the mediator part, the mindset, getting there, the developing for that. So just a little bit on that background is definitely something we would want from you.
Sure. Okay. So you want to know kind of how I got into mediation and what I do.
If you can go back in time, as much back in time you want to take us.
Okay.
What do you like it?
So, I identify a lot with what Prabhat, said about having a kind of personality or a knack for mediation, for seeing both sides of the argument. I was always one of these people, even when I was a child in school, when friends were having an argument, I was always the one who saw both sides of the argument, and one of my struggles as a lawyer, frankly, was that as a litigator, you are paid to take one position and argue that position to the death. And I always saw the other side's argument, and so I had a real tension with the advocacy role. I was never a very good advocate, I think, because I realized that I identify with being a neutral. My identity really is not to be a gladiator or an advocate. My identity is to be a neutral. And I don't think I kind of articulated that until fairly recently in my career, but that was something that I kind of innately knew about myself. One of the problems I think with the legal profession is that, at least in the US, and maybe it's different in India, but the neutral role or career path is not something that's taught to us in law school, right? We're always just taught to be an advocate, whether it's on the litigation side or the corporate transactional side. But the point is always that you are representing your client's interests only, right, against the other side. Maybe it's because you're putting a deal together, so you have to work collaboratively, but you still are an advocate, and that's what you're being trained to do. And I think many of us are drawn to the mediation profession because we identify not so much with being an advocate for one side, but we identify with being a neutral and seeing both sides. And being that translator, that cultural translator, Prabhat, in the way that you've described, right, between different mindsets, different worldviews, different cultures. India is a multicultural country. And so, you have lots of these different cultural conflicts, I'm sure. I'm one of these people who grew up in a multicultural environment. So one of the things that you probably don't know about me is that I'm actually a quarter Indian. Did you know that about me, Vikram?
You told me last time. That's why I know. You told me.
Yeah. And so, I'm also an OCI. I have an overseas citizenship of India, but the rest of my family is Japanese. Right.
Interesting combination. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination. My grandfather moved to Japan in the 1920s. That was it was very rare at that point for Indians to marry Japanese. So there was always kind of this multiculturalism in my family. And then, the Indian side of the family was from Sindh in what is now Pakistan. So, after the partition, all of them, spread out around the world, and some of them had left even before the partition. And so, I have relatives in all these pockets of the world, like Caribbean, Europe, Africa, Asia. And so I think as part of that kind of multicultural background, you really do gain an appreciation of the fact that people from different cultures see things very, very differently, right? And it's constantly a kind of navigation between different worldviews and seeing that what seems obvious to you from one cultural perspective is completely counterintuitive to someone from a different cultural matrix, and so that I think also helped me hone my kind of neutral identity, if you will. So it's something actually I'm hoping to write about at some point, because I think many of us in the legal profession and even outside the legal profession really do have this neutral identity, for lack of a better phrase. And that's part of, I think, what draws us to mediation. So, the first time that I kind of explored I didn't even know what mediation was, because I wasn't taught about mediation in law school. So I went to law school back in the mid-1990s. And although there were mediation courses back then, it was still very, it was not the mainstream at all. It was a very fringe kind of thing. And so it wasn't until I started clerking for a judge after I graduated from law school and just saw the extent to which very small disputes were litigated by lawyers with these stacks and stacks of briefs and exhibits and so on. And I thought, there must be a better way, to resolve these, some of them very trivial conflicts, and then I started getting involved with community mediation programs. Someone suggested that I try this, and I was a pro bono mediator for many years, and then started doing mediations for these high court type, mediation programs like you have in India, right? The court annexed mediation programs, and then kind of just realized at that point that this was my calling, that this is what I really wanted to do. But it's very tough to make a living as a mediator, right? So I did spend a couple of years kind of breaking out on my own. I needed a break from being an advocate in a big law firm. I taught mediation, and I took mediation cases, on my own. But it's a very tough thing to do. I think in India, probably still it's difficult to make a career as a mediator.
Look, I'm there. I'm going to make my career only out of being a mediator, not even out of mediation, not even being a mediation advocate, only as a mediator. So I'm one of those I don't know if there is anyone else who does that, because everyone is some way connected to the court and they can't leave that because maybe they've been part of litigation for so much time. Even Mr. Panchu, I was telling him, why do you go to court if a person like you is not available as a mediator all the time? Then we are good. They have some fundamental problem somewhere. Because if people like that are not available all the time for mediation, there is an issue. So we are not, I think that needs to be addressed definitely, as to why are we going wrong? Because according to me, there is enough work. There is no dearth of work.
Yes.
So
I don't think that you're doing anything wrong. I just think it's a very difficult market, because there are many, many more people who want to be mediators than there is work. At least in the US, that's the case, right? And it's a small fraction of people who are getting the lion's share of all the mediation work. The people who are able to really make a good living as mediators, it's a very tiny percentage. There's a saying in the US that any lawyer over the age of 40 or 50, considers themselves to be a mediator. you know.
And it should be, yeah. And it's a good thing. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, it's a good thing. I mean, that's the way it should be actually. The
yeah,
40, 50, by that time, you've got that mindset. If you have the mindset, like I always keep saying, mediator mindset. I mean, the
yes,
mediator part is something you can use whatever term you want to use for yourself, doesn't matter. But you have the mindset
yes.
or not. And if you have the mindset, like you were saying, I mean, of course, you didn't take us, you have to take us back into that school part of it, that in school you had that mindset, like you said. So
Mhm.
how did that come out? I mean, did you do it with friends, or friends came to you and they said, Hiro, you have to help us to settle this?
Yeah, so I was often the one kind of elected to help out with conflicts, even neighborly conflicts. So I remember, my parents had this, uh, what they thought of as a crazy neighbor. And they had a conflict about lights being turned on at night and keeping the other side awake, and it was a terrible conflict over a very trivial issue. And, even though it was my parents involved, I was the one who kind of reached out to the neighbor and said, "Hey, let's see if we can talk this out." So I think that was somehow, genetically coded into me or something, or just part of my personality. Um, and I think a lot of us who are drawn to this profession are like that too.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, this is exactly what I've been talking about. That natural ability is there right when you're in school. It's all there. You do
Yeah,
the process. Everything that you people train, whatever training happens, whatever you call it, 40 hour, whatever training, you
yeah,
ask a child who has that ability, and the children who have experienced that, they will tell you everything about mediation. They have done everything. So there is,
yes.
I mean, it's nothing that they need to be taught. Now, only thing is that a person who doesn't have that ability, and you want to make him into that, or whatever gender, you want to make that person into this person whom we call a mediator, it's never going to happen. And that is why that much work has not happened on mediation, and people
Mhm.
don't get that much work, because you are putting it into the hands of the wrong people. And if the
Could
user
be.
experience is not good, that it's not going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not going to take.
Yeah.
I'm trying to spread this into the villages of India. So I was speaking to someone from one state who
Uh,
I want him to go out and at least go and identify them. So on just one conversation, he was able to tell me that in that village there are these two people, in that village there are these three people who people go to help them resolve the disputes. They're all out there, and they have
mhm,
the natural ability, but no one tells them there's a profession like this. So I have to
mhm.
bring them out, make that into a profession, because they don't know how to value themselves. They're
Yeah.
invaluable service they're providing, but
Yes.
they don't know that. I mean, the lawyers are the ones who make the money, and these people who help people resolve disputes, no one actually values them, because there's never a values put have been put on that.
Yeah, it could be. And it could also be because, the legal profession, which is the profession that deals with disputes, I don't know what the situation is like in Indian law schools, but again, in the US, we're never taught that there's this third path, which is that you can be a neutral. Typically you don't get to be a neutral unless you've really proven yourself as an advocate. So you've been litigating for 20, 30, 40 years, right? And then you get picked to be a judge. I think that's very much the common law model of how you become a judge. I don't know if it's different in India,
We have
but the
exam, yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
is that right? Is the
We
same,
have
same?
examinations. There's examinations at the first level. So you have examinations, and people clear those examinations, and they become judges at the district court levels. Some are
I
elevated to the high court. Some are directly elevated as lawyers. They're elevated into the high court.
I see.
So then
But can you become a judge straight out of law school in India?
yeah, but there's a certain number of experience. So no, not directly. You need
Oh,
a
not
certain
directly.
number of years of experience. You give that examination, and then you
I
can.
see. I see. So maybe that's a kind of hybrid model, because I think in some countries you can actually become a judge right out of law school. So you can kind of train to become a judge throughout your law school period and then kind of pass some
Yeah.
exams and become a judge. In the US, typically, you wouldn't get elected to become a judge unless you practice for at least 10 years, I would imagine. So you'd have to have a lot of experience. And the reality is that, people who are very good at being litigators are not necessarily the kinds of people who we're talking about, right? Who see things from both sides,
Absolutely.
and then so they become judges. But maybe we do need to do a better job in terms of identifying those people who are like us, who have
Exactly.
that mindset.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing, because I'm telling you that the identification has to be left to the people who have to use them. The user knows who those people are. And that's why I'm saying that when you regulate something, you are actually limiting someone's choice about something he knows about. If you, like I said, in a village, they know. If you, I mean, if I take you through maybe a conversation with someone from there, he'll tell you that these people, now, can you regulate those people? They're already doing it, and they've been doing it for tens and hundreds of years. Are you going to go there and regulate them? And
yeah, well, this was a big debate that we had in that webinar maybe a year or so ago. I think you were a part of that, Vikram.
Yeah.
You know, in India and in many other countries, certification and qualification requirements for mediators is a big thing. And in some countries, actually, they say you have to be a lawyer and you have to have a law degree, right? I think Turkey is one of those countries. Greece might be one of those countries, which, you know, I agree that that would exclude people like Prabhat, you know, from being a mediator, which doesn't, you know, seem right on some level. And I think, you know, each jurisdiction has answered this question in its own way. I think the US is a little bit of an outlier, but our position has been so far that we shouldn't really micromanage the regulation of mediators.
And I actually, that clip of yours, I actually show that to people. That clip where you said that we let the market decide, I actually put it out. Of course, in meetings that I have not on these clips, because that is not I don't have the copyright on that, so I don't put it up on public meetings. But when I have private meetings, I actually show them that clip. Because I said, look at this person. He's sitting in the US, they're a mature market, and he's saying this. And I don't know why we want to, at this stage, where of course we're much larger, we have 4 times the size of that country. We have no base at all. And we go out and wanting to regulate something which the parties themselves are the best people to decide whom they want to go to. We want to regulate.
And let me just clarify that I wasn't necessarily saying that regulation is wrong. I was just saying that this is what we have decided in the US. Now, it might be that there'll come a time when we realize that we do need to do some minimal regulation, right? I don't think we're there yet. And I also recognize that in some countries, regulation might be more important than it is in the US, right? There might be certain environments in which the US model just doesn't work. Right, but so far it seems to have worked more or less in the U.S. But for whatever reason, you know, many countries really feel the need to certify and regulate. And I agree with you, Vikram. I think that there are benefits to regulation, but there are also disadvantages, and we really have to think about that, you know, carefully.
Yeah, no, but look, for me, I have to look at the entire country. I can't think of commercial mediation as one area of high value commercial mediation to be regulated like this, family to be regulated like this to be regulated like that. We can't divide mediation into parts and start regulating parts at this stage. We're not there. I don't even know if the US is there. I don't know, but we are not there at all. That whole term itself has to go out, first of all. You're in a market where 40 years, you might have, there is so much of mediation which has happened, but there are parts in the US, I know I've spoken to people, they don't know what it is. They've told me, they've said it's arbitration. To use terms like that, I was very surprised. I said, 40 years you've had mediation. If we keep talking about the US and you don't even know what it is, you did not know. I've heard the word, but it's arbitration, na? I was surprised. I was shocked, actually. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit surprising in the major metropolitan areas, especially where lawyers are involved. But I wouldn't be surprised if people in the US are still confused. You know, the other issue that I think we might want to talk about is just the different styles of mediation. I'm not sure how mediations typically unfold in India, whether there's a dominant style, facilitative or evaluative, joint sessions, caucuses, or so on. But, you know, especially in the commercial sphere in the US, mediation is a very evaluative process. And some people criticize that and they say, well, that seems more like arbitration or adjudication than mediation. And so even within the mediation community, I think there's a somewhat of a disagreement about what mediation really is. It's supposed to be a kind of joint session driven problem solving effort where we both, you know, both sides kind of communicate together and solve problems together, or does it need to be more of an evaluative process where the parties never speak to each other face to face, and the arbiter or the mediator kind of moves back and forth between caucus sessions? These are big, you know, differences of opinion that I think exist around the world.
Because the way I look at it is that it is such a personal thing. First of all, that mediator has their way of going about it, and they know best how they want to take it forward, looking at the circumstance. Because I keep saying this, I will repeat it, I keep repeating it, hear this a lot of times when I say that 7 billion people, more than that, almost 8 now, so 7 billion people on this planet, each of them is unique. They have a dispute, that's a very unique interaction between them. This mediator is unique. That whole combination is so unique, it's not going to be repeated again. So for us to decide that this is the format that needs to be done in that particular situation, we are wrong. We'll be wrong. We are already looking ahead on something which is not even there. So the way I look at it is that it has to flow the way it has to, except that in our advantage that we have in our conciliation, it says that the conciliator may suggest. It says may suggest. So it's not that that suggestion has to be there. I mean, no one is forcing you to take the suggestion, first of all, that everyone knows, but they can suggest. So the whole concept that it had to be facilitative, at least that's out of the thing. That at least that confusion people can't create under conciliation, under our law. That's the advantage I have. Otherwise, the point is that if you do not, if you hold back, and you had said, no, this was supposed to be only facilitative because the conciliator suggested, no, the settlement agreement doesn't survive.
Yes.
So those issues could have come up. So at least that part has been clarified. At least that issue cannot come up. But these are problems. I'm going to tell you, these discussions that you have on facilitative, evaluative, these are discussions of course, in the US, there's a large discussion on these and the transformative concept and all those models. A lot of discussions happen. But I still feel these are academic conversations. When it comes to the practical side as practitioners, I don't see that should be an issue when you are part of a process, because at that point of time, what you're going to do, how you're going to take it forward, you know best. And if you don't know best, then the parties don't have the right person. That's the way.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Although I think some mediators, are only good at one type, and others are only good at the other type. And there might be a kind of mixed messages sent about what process you're entering into if you're not really clear about the orientation of the mediator and so on. But it's true. I mean, I agree with the basic point, which is that there should be a diversity of options, right? And the fundamental point is that it's a consensual process where the parties have to agree on the outcome. And whether you reach that outcome through a more facilitative process or a more evaluative process, it's still mediation, right?
No, but I'm saying, even if you want to watch a movie. Now there is a certain genre that you like, someone else likes a certain genre. Now the point is, you ask the person whom you think watches the same kind of movies as you, and he suggests something to you, and you say, okay, this is all right. Same thing with the mediation, it is word of mouth which is going to spread. So someone who has gone through a process whom you can relate to, and that person says, so and so helped us settle this matter. So okay, this person looks at things the way I look at it. So the person they must have used would be someone I'll be comfortable with. They'll go to that person. That's how this whole concept has to spread, by word of mouth. This whole thing of, look, you are part of a large organization, which is on a panel of a very large organization. So your panel concept in a country where it's been there for 40 years, I can understand. But for a country like ours, where I feel in general, word of mouth has always been the important way of getting professionals. Always. I mean, if you have to get, I was asking Prabhat, I mean, this whole panel thing came up, one of these discussions on accreditation came up with him. He was saying, should I get myself accredited? I said, look, according to me, people are going to still ask people about whom they should use. As a lawyer also, we have laws. I mean, enough databases available for lawyers. No one goes out and picks up a lawyer like that. Everyone asks people. That's the way we have to spread it. So I still feel that it is going to be something in even the style of it. Everyone will understand what works for them, and they will tell people accordingly. So I don't think we should be worried about the terminology, but academicians, we will have those discussions. But Prabhat, yeah, please.
I just a thought that came to my point, and it's relevant at this level of and this point of conversation and discussion. I don't know. Maybe the futurist. If I look into the future, There could be a possibility that mediation may require a certain kind of structured and formal education to develop as a career. For instance, I mean, let's take management, for example. I mean, you are a manager or you're not a manager, but once you've done a course in management, you are a qualified manager, right? So, I mean, some people have the knack for managing finances, but somebody who's done a chartered accountancy is qualified to look into finances and accounting, and therefore a qualified chartered accountant would be considered to have that kind of legitimacy to be an advisor to a business. So that could be a block where people will say, "Hey, fine, they could be a mediator." But in today's world, everything is seen from the perspective of what's your qualification, So that could be a barrier at this stage. However, I mean, that's a barrier from somebody being very, very selective. But if you look at the real situation, I mean, if as a business I'm going out and looking for a good mediator, a mediator to resolve, let's not call him good or bad, but a mediator to resolve a dispute that I have, I need not necessarily go for a lawyer, because I know that mediation may not require that adversarial orientation of mind where the lawyer is wanting to do and die for the client's point of view. What a person with a neutral frame of mind would be better positioned to resolve the dispute. So they would be looking for that. Now, there is no such qualified person. So they would take references like what Vikram described, that they would go for saying, "Oh, come on, let's take this person's advice, and who does he recommend?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are challenges that one is faced with. Yeah.
Well,
just a thought that I thought I will share.
Well, finally, what really comes out of all these discussions, finally, there is a certain number of people in a certain kind of a sphere who keep discussing mediation. But the point is, are you going to be able to create a law which will say for these 1% of the population, this law will apply, but this 99% of the population will have a separate law? That's never going to happen. I mean, definitely it's not going to happen. So what you'll do is, for catering to that 1%, 1% is a very large population. I'm not even saying 1%. For that, if you will want to, because that's the discussion, that is the rounds it takes between those people, that 1% is not going to finish off the profession for the country. So because 99% of the people do not, first of all, are never going to look at any accreditation or anything. They're still going to ask around. And I'm saying it's already there in the villages today. If I speak to someone, they identify themselves, and they are still going to go to those people. Now, whether we can create a profession for them, that part of it is what we have to bring out in a profession. We have to break the chicken and the egg situation, that once people understand that this is a profession and they have to pay for it, then those people will also come out and they might leave other things. Right now, those people are successful in their other work that they do, and in the evening, maybe people will come to them and they'll help them resolve, and those people will go off. So now, whether we can bring them out from that, I think that part of it is going to be a challenge. If the mediation in the court system, you are going to end up letting people mediate with $10 a session.
Right. Well, that's the big challenge, I think, in India right now, right? Because the high court mediation programs, many of them are quite successful, and there are lots of cases that are being processed. But I think India now is poised to make that transition to a private mediation market, so that there are more people are willing to pay more for the mediation services. Mediators can actually make a living doing exclusively mediation. That really, I think, is the next level. And I mean, I'm hopeful that India is poised to make that transition. But it seems like there's still lots of resistance. As you mentioned, lawyers have their self-interest as well. And
no, actually, it's not just the lawyers. The judiciary has a self-interest. The
yeah.
judiciary is what are they looking out? Backlog should get cleared. They are not out there to develop a profession. They're not even concerned about that.
Yeah.
Its focus is very clear. How can we reduce the backlog in the courts?
Right.
But that doesn't, I mean, the mediators, okay, I can understand the lawyers practicing in the court and the judge says, okay, so, I mean, sends it to the mediation center and a certain person is appointed as a mediator, which is also wrong. You don't appoint mediators for people. They choose mediators.
Yes.
So first of all, that fundamental thing that you are putting into people's mind is that someone is going to appoint a mediator for us. The whole basic party self-determination you are going to finish off in mediation.
Yeah.
Second,
well, I don't think it's a complete no-no to appoint mediators. I mean, sometimes the parties don't know who they want, right? And but I think I agree with you that they should have at least a choice to choose who they want. Is that not how it works in the high courts?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
You can't choose your mediator.
Look, under the law, you can choose your mediator. Under the law says that if you want, you don't have to use the person from the mediation center. But I won't even comment on the court system because I'm far removed from it. I feel that's the worst thing that's happening to the, and I know the example because there's a particular webinar I was attending. I don't know this person, but he's quite a senior mediator in India. And he was giving his own example that they set up, some lawyers got together and they set up a mediation center in the city. And it was doing well. And then the court started a court annex mediation center and they had to close it down. I mean, were you talking about moving to private mediation? Private mediation had to shut down because because the court system is going to spoil people. How are you going to ask people to pay tomorrow? Okay, today you want to look at your backlog. Okay, you clear your backlog. At the end of the day, are you going to be able to tell people to pay $10,000 for a day of mediation? Are they going to ever pay for it if they've paid $10?
But you'd think that developing a robust private market of mediation would actually in the long term help the backlog, right? Because you'd help to spread the culture of mediation and resolving, right? So I would have thought that maybe from a short-sighted point of view, the courts wouldn't be interested in encouraging private mediation, but from the long haul view, wouldn't it be better for the courts ultimately if there was a big private mediation market?
No, I know you come from a jurisdiction where the court started through the court system. So definitely you have that. I am saying that the courts have no business being part of it. They're the most inefficient institution in India. No other institution can sit on someone's matter for 20 years. The court itself will issue some kind of directions if the government sat on something for 20 years. They are doing it because they can get away with it, because the way we've created our judiciary. But they have, I mean, if they work that you are supposed to do, you are supposed to do that. The mediation is not part of what you do because people have to go for it because you are not doing what you are doing. So it's they're two different areas altogether. If I want to go for mediation and I have that culture of mediation develops, I am not touching courts. It's a different path I've taken. To say that the court annexed mediation center concept, according to me, is the worst thing that can happen. What you're telling people is mediation and courts are connected. Why? They're not connected. They're the totally diametrically opposite things. Because these people because the judges have not been able to decide matters, backlog is there, so they need a release. So mediation works out in a court system. Okay, let's send them there. What you're saying is we can't do our job. Please do what you should have done in the first place. You should not have come to us. So that's what you want. But I mean, it's not the mediation centers. If you had to develop mediation centers, they had to be totally away from the court. People should never ever connect litigation and mediation. It is the worst. And they should never connect free and mediation. Then these two things are happening with the court annex mediation centers.
Yeah. So I tend to agree with you, although I do think that in the beginning, when you're really trying to promote this new idea of mediation, it may not be such a bad idea to promote it as a free service. And then once, it picks up and people realize the value of mediation, to then start charging. It's kind of like, if you want to provide some new service to people who don't really know about the service, you might say, well, I'll give you a free, 1 day of my service and you see how you like it.
No, I'm doing.
If you like it, then I'll start charging.
No, Hiro, what I did was this particular matter that I was doing. There's a very large company. I told them, look, my fee is not going to be a reason for you not to try it. We are going to do it. whatever at the end of it you feel is the value that I have added, you can pay me according to that. Not an issue.
Wow.
So it's not free. It's not come to you free. I'm going to go through. You don't pay me anything. You have the right to do it. I have not said anything. But they were so fair. I mean, you can imagine. You can't even imagine how fair they were.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that the starting point should not be free. It should be what value you receive out of this, and let people try it. And once they try it, they are going to get benefit out of it. And themselves, there's no concept of someone, once he understands the value, you are settling a matter for them, is going to hold back, because they know the other side, what they've saved on the other side. So they know best. So I'm just saying, don't connect, say free, say that try it without committing on a fee. I'm saying that.
I see. I mean, or I think another way to do it would be to say, it's free, so try it, and then eventually kind of move to a fee-based process. I mean, I think it's almost the same thing. What you're talking about,
little different.
It's a little bit different. That's true, but it's more on a systemic level, right? Because you're saying essentially there's no obligation to pay. The first phase of the rollout of mediation in India is going to be, or any country is going to be, it's a free service. But as people understand that there's a value to this, right, then they need to start paying for the service. And that's at least how it worked in the US, right? In the beginning, they were all pro bono court annex programs. And then the mediator started saying, hey, we need to get some fair compensation here. And I think the parties realized, hey, they do deserve that too, right? Exactly. And so they do now get some compensation, not the entire amount. But it's also about supply and demand, and the reality is that many parties are not willing to pay mediators, or they're not willing to pay mediators the same rates that they would pay, their lawyers. And so that's really a barrier that I think we need to be able to cross. Even in the US, we still have that problem, right? So there are some mediators who do a lot of work through the court annex programs, and they get paid, but they don't get paid, what mediators at JAMS would get paid, for example, right? And so, it's a tough profession, I think, to make a good deal of money. I think that's always going to be a struggle, because there are many, many more people who want to be mediators than there are.
Look, I'm telling you what my experience has been. There is no problem in fees. People are willing to pay very good fees. So fees is not a problem. So money is not a problem. The point is that when do you tell people that these are the people with the mediator mindset and these are mediators? And when you say mediators, you are saying panels, you're saying accreditations and certifications and all that, that mediators. And if they find the people with the mediator mindset, the profession can take off and the people will actually get a good user experience. Word spread so fast. You cannot even imagine. One settlement you do, it'll reach at least 1,000 people. They'll go out to 100 and they'll be actually maybe 10,000 people. I'm saying only 1,000. Immediately, I mean, once a settlement, if a matter of yours is pending in court and you get it done outside and you can get a good user experience, the whole world gets to know, because everyone has known about your dispute. They've known you've been in dispute that many years. And if you can settle that, word of mouth, not a problem. So, but the point is, it all starts with that user experience. And how do you give a person a user experience from a person who you want to make into a mediator? You can't make me. I'm telling you, what you started off with your mindset in school and the kind of person you are, that's the person you've been. I can send you to 1,000 hours of training. I can't change that aspect of you. I can give someone else 1,000 hours of training. I can't get them into that mindset that you were, because you grew up with a certain mindset. Everyone was not like you. Everyone was not like you. People, you were different because that's the way people looked at you. People looked at you like that. It wasn't you who said, I am now so and so, you come to me. No, they came to you because they saw you, your conduct, the way you dealt with people. So everything is being looked at. That's why I'm saying the user knows best. They are identifying the right people. It is us who are telling them, maybe this is not the right person. This person has to have this degree attached to it. Then he becomes the right person. So you've sent him from the right path onto a totally wrong path.
I see.
So I am working backwards. I am saying right now, of course, hopefully this law doesn't come up. And if it comes up, the government understands the larger country situation. So for the moment, let's see, the law is not here. We have what we have. So what I'm doing is all these people that we are identifying in the villages and everywhere, smaller towns, everywhere, in the communities, that becomes a pool. So first of all, the community itself uses these people because they have the trust in them. They already trust them. Like you have community centers, so you have community mediation centers, but this is created. You don't need an infrastructure for it.
So Vikram, are you saying that we can't teach people to be mediators or good mediators?
No. I'd never.
Really?
It's a mindset thing. I will never be able to. You can get them
so
out. You can get them out. Like Ken Cloak says, he went to a training and he realized this is me. This is what I want to do. That is perfectly all right. That exposure to a training can tell you this is what I want to do. For that, what I've done is I don't know whether, of course, you want to get time to do that, but on my channel, there are playlists. So I've put all these webinars, everything that happens, workshops and everything. There's a huge database. So I'm saying that the person who had to be exposed to this, and which would have been a very rare thing, that he lands up in a training and finds out about a training, we still have to look at the larger country. I'm saying always, whenever you look at it from the Indian perspective, just look at the 1.3 billion people. Look at our size and just tell yourself that how many people in this country would actually ever be exposed to any training in mediation. And who are those people who are doing those training? How many numbers do we have? So how many people can they train in a whole year? Let's look at those numbers and look at the size that we need. I told you, every year 18 million matters go into court. Forget the 43 million which are lying there. There is more than enough work in the courts to do in mediation. Let them do that. Let's look at the 18 million that go in. Out of that, let me say, okay, forget I'm saying even compoundable criminal offenses can go into mediation. For a moment, let's even leave that out. 30% civil cases, civil matters. 5.4 million of those cases, which are totally something which can be handled before they reach court, right? There are at least 10 times that many disputes which don't even reach that stage of being filed in court. They're settled at that level itself. So all that is, there is so much work there. Where are you going to be able to train them? And if you start that process, you'll have every corner in this country. We're very fast at this. Every corner, there'll be a board, mediation training. But just because you can get a stamp at the end of it, only then if you can be a mediator. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example, Hiro. Now I'll tell you, our Supreme Court judge, he just made a comment that only 25% of the lawyers who pass out of law school should be practicing in the courts. This is 5 years. They've gone through 5 years of education. Here we talk about 40 hours. They've gone through 5 years. It hasn't turned out well for that profession. So these are very serious things. You have to look at it from the Indian perspective. Look, I can't even say the law education in the US. Would a judge in the Supreme Court in the US say that? I don't know. Will he say only 25% are capable of practicing in this country? I don't think so. Maybe not. But here they've said that.
Yeah, I don't know what the fraction is, but a lot of more people get qualified, obviously, than are suited to the profession. I think that's probably true. Yeah, and there is a dropout rate. I don't know what that rate is, but many students go through the law school experience, and then after several years, they decide they want to switch careers. It's a tough profession. It's not suited to everybody, and I think part of what you're saying is that there are certain kinds of personality traits or characteristics that we each have, and you're saying that you can't train someone to be a neutral who's not already kind of born to be a neutral. It sounds like is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And I think it's helpful to have a neutral orientation. And I think is that something that we're born with, or is it something that we can learn? That I don't know. I mean, it could be that I wasn't born to be a neutral and I just kind of learned those skills somehow because of my particular upbringing. And so I wouldn't want to rule out the idea that people could be trained in mediation and then could kind of learn a new skill set that maybe they weren't born with, but that actually they excel in. I don't know.
That's why Hiro, this whole series, Evolution of a Mediator, was only to get into this. Let's take mediators from all over the world. It's not going to happen. I've only done I think about 20 up till now. But the point is, the whole idea exactly was this. Let us see what's the person where they started off from. Today we know them as
Yes.
mediators, but what is their whole life journey like? What has it been? What are you saying? There are things which they did not have, got created somewhere,
Uh,
or was it a change because of
what
being
have you found
experienced?
so far? I'm curious.
Very no,
A
no, you
sample
have to
size of
watch them,
20.
You're not going to get it
Yeah,
so easy.
but I'm not going to be able to watch all of them. But with this sample size of 20, do you really get the impression that
Yes,
certain people
there
were
is.
just kind of
There is a
interesting?
thread, you'll see, very interesting thread that's coming out, but I don't want to like to say anything about it,
Thank
because
you.
I want everyone to gauge what they gauge
Yeah,
from it.
yes.
But
Yeah,
very interesting things are coming out of that.
yeah,
And let's see, over someone will maybe go through them and tell me, okay, this is what I've. There are people who like the people more oriented towards the academic side of it, they might study it. But just
yeah.
the fact that Ken Cloke's story, which was by itself, when we started off, I mean, the whole point of getting, I mean, initially it was asking all kinds of questions, getting into very small,
Yes.
that once first episode, we were only in his childhood. I mean, that
Uh-huh.
we very moved very slowly. So, I mean, it is something which is, you have to get down to such basics. One is, if I ask Hiro, you in one sentence, you can tell me, okay, I grew up here and I have that family thing, and that in it can take 5 minutes, or I can take you through 5 hours of that. There is so much getting into that. So I told you right now, I don't want to take you through that. It's not, I will do it, but I'll do it later. But this is like I said, it's not the age. I mean, you might think, no, I'm not that young. But the point is, I feel it's only about after 65 that people would like to talk about very minute details about their life. And
Interesting.
these, you need those minute details. It will not happen on a general conversation, very minute. So interesting things that people talk about what they've said, maybe it's those negative phases in their lives, those
Yeah,
negative phases. Now those negative phases, did they change the way you looked at things? Maybe,
yeah.
definitely, that could have
Hmm.
changed things. So whatever it can be, whatever happens, I mean, those are things which you have to bring out, and everyone
Mm.
doesn't like to talk about it. Like Mr. Panchu, before he came for the episode, he said, look, I'm not going to talk about anything personal. It's only going to be about the mediation center I started. I said, perfect. I'm not going to say no to you. Obviously, not a no. But when he came in, the kinds of things he spoke about and his own
Yeah.
personal life and what he had gone through, very important point that was in his life, what he had gone through. He would not, I mean, maybe people would not have known about it. He would not have spoken about it, that could have changed his whole mindset. Like you said,
Yes.
can that happen at a later stage? I still feel the seed was definitely there. It's always there.
Mhm.
That could have been, it grew faster. Suddenly got very
Yes.
good rainfall and got all the manure in the world and everything grew faster. Could be.
Yes.
But I'm saying that, to get to that point was not easy. Well, he was not
Yes.
willing to, initially, he was not willing to talk about anything personal, like I said. But he
I
spoke
see.
about that dark phase of his life. And
Interesting.
that did that change him? That's so. But at the end of the day, what we have is a person who's, every one of us, or who you also, is a collection of all these experiences.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that I'm still feel, I'm saying the seed has to be there. You were saying maybe if the seed is not there, can suddenly a tree sprout? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a nature nurture maybe thing, right? Maybe you're saying it has to be a matter of nature, like you're either born with the mediator gene or you're not.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess for me, the jury is a little bit is still out, right? I'm not sure whether it's something biological and you're kind of born with it, or it's something that you learn over time with your particular environment. It might be something that you could learn later in life, maybe. But I think the point is that at some point we choose how we identify ourselves. I'm an Asian American man. I'm a gay man. I'm a lawyer. I'm a neutral. I'm an arbitrator. I'm a mediator. Whatever it is I am, right? You kind of gravitate towards an identity, and I think most of us who are successful mediators have this neutral identity. They identify with being in the middle, not being the advocate so much, but really seeing both sides and having an interest really in listening without prejudging, and having empathy. And it's something that you might have a proclivity towards, but it's also something that just because you have that nature doesn't mean that, you know, you have all the skills at once. I mean, for me as a mediator, it's a constant process of learning and teaching myself and the feedback loop, you know, and working on things that I find challenging, even about being a neutral, right? You know, so just because we have this predisposition to be a mediator or to be a good listener doesn't mean that we're always listening well and doing our role well. And maybe, you know, part of being a good mediator is also being able to criticize oneself and to learn from our mistakes and not be overconfident, you know, because the mediator's path is a lonely path in many ways, right? Because unless you're in some kind of reflective practice group where you're talking about your cases and the challenges that you face and so on, you really have to teach yourself, right? You're having these confidential mediations that no one else is observing. And if you want to grow as a mediator and improve your mediation practice, you have to be the type of person who can self-reflect and say, you know, I made a mistake there, or did I do the right thing there? And how could I have done that differently or better in the future?
But I think, Hiro, but this thing is a person like that, you might say that in the mediation practice, but a person like that would be reflecting about their lives also. And
Yes.
everyone doesn't do that. So you would be doing it as part of your life in everything that you do. So you look back, you're improving yourself in as a person doing that. So so this only comes out in your mediation practice, yes, but it is a larger self that you are. So I mean, and everyone is not like that. Look, I'm saying why you might take it for granted that everyone is like that. Only everyone, no, everyone doesn't do it. Everyone's not reflective in life in general. Forget the mediation part of it. Like I've said, this is just a word and a practice that you have developed. But as a person, you are all those things already. That you might choose this path or you not choose this path, it doesn't matter. There is a certain special person that you are. And that is what you carry with you there. It's not that you go there and you become someone else and then you come back into life, you become someone else. No, it is a whole, because that is what you are. And that becomes part of you. And that is why it is sort not valued. The person themselves don't value it because it's just me. That's the way. If you don't have to tell me when I have conversations with people whether I be able to understand them or am I listening to them. Do I have to listen to them? I might find ways otherwise. That's I just have to do it. But how I do it is that's a very individual thing. So I'm saying that we just carry that everywhere with us. So just the fact that you came into mediation, yes, you carried it there, but you could have gone into something else also. But you would have carried that self of you, which reflective is just one part of it. You talk about listening. I mean, these are just things that we've pinpointed, but you don't know there are certain things which you don't even know about that you have as part of you, because maybe in the mediation world, that part doesn't have a word to it yet. But maybe after 10 years, someone will put a word to it. But I'm saying that's why I'm saying the theoretical part of it is not required. It's a package that you bring with you. So that's now can you create that package? Is not that's what we're trying to get. Can you create the pack? For you the jury is out. For me it's not. I know.
I see. Yeah. It's a tough question, but really, I mean, it's less for me about whether it's nature or nurture and more sort of what are the qualities of a good mediator, right? Can we agree on that? Because I think that, you know, people might disagree, right? Some people might say a good mediator is someone who can bang on each side's case and kind of pressure them into coming to the middle, you know, someone who has authority and gravitas, who can really tell each side that, you know, these are the holes in your case and these are the weaknesses and you really ought to settle. And if you don't have that gravitas, you're not going to make a good mediator. And others will say, no, you know, a good mediator is someone who helps the parties understand and come to their own conclusions about the weaknesses of their case and their reasons to settle. You know, so do you notice a disagreement even within the Indian mediation community?
No, I'll tell you, Mr. Panchu and I did a co-mediation. Okay. Mr. Panchu gets his gravitas and everything with it. I don't have that. So now we worked perfectly well. As a combination, it was perfect. So it's just that if there are certain ways of going about it, he has his way of going about it. I have my way of, I should not question my way,
Mm,
because I bring what I bring. If I start questioning myself, I'll be wrong, because it is everything that you said about what people generally say about what mediator should be. According to me, it should not be put out, because some people might just stay away from the profession. They might have everything in them, but this particular thing you said, oh, I don't have it, forget it, I can't be a mediator. No, you
mm,
you bring in something else into it, whatever it might be. I'm not, that's why I don't even talk about mediation process and style and how about it, because everyone is so individual in their way of going about life. At the end of the day, everyone has their way of bringing people together in whatever way they will be, and everyone is not suited for everyone. We just feel
yeah,
there is no such one general mediator who will work for everyone.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that is
that's
why
right.
this whole process is such that you have to be comfortable with the person you are, and that comes in one, once you meet people.
But is there a common core that all these different styles of mediation have in your view?
Yeah,
Like, is there?
you have to be a good human being. That's what I've understood.
Mm,
Everything else falls around it, and I found all people whom I've identified with the mediator mindset, they're all good human beings, and
mhm.
everything else can come around it. But
And
at
what
the
does
core,
that mean? What do you mean by a good human being?
no, now I don't know whether that there is an individual gauge of it or not. I don't know, but there is something which you can actually either feel, or you, I don't know how it comes across. It just comes across. I can't
Yeah,
even, like I'm saying, for me to put words to it, I think I'll be doing injustice to the concept of being a good human being.
I see. I
It just
see.
comes out. I mean, if I look, I should, the fact that you are sitting with me here is because I have heard you talk somewhere. It's come across to me in a webinar that you were talking about. I was not talking to you. I was
Right.
just listening to you.
Yeah,
So it comes across to you in various ways. You don't know how it's going to come to you, but it
yeah,
just comes to you. It could be the way you talk, the way, I mean, it's just, it may be the genuineness and the way you conduct yourself. It could be anything. I mean, how it comes
yeah.
across to someone, it's their own personal way of gauging it.
So that's really interesting, and I'm flattered that you think of me as a good human being. I don't know that I know what that means, and I often wonder how good a human being I am actually. But the more I reflect about mediation, and the more I reflect about sort of what is really important in mediation, it really is this neutrality piece, right?
Yeah.
Some people will say, well, it's about listening, people who are good listeners. Other people will say it's about empathy, right? Um, but I think all of those have to do ultimately with neutrality, because if you're not really neutral, you won't have the empathy, because you'll be judging the other side and you'll be saying, well, that person is a crook, or that person is unreasonable, or that person is difficult. And that will block your ability to listen and to be empathetic. And this is actually a challenge that I face every time I do a mediation, is to really focus on being neutral, right? And maybe that's the same thing as saying being a good person, being good to both
Yeah.
sides,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
But invariably, what happens in a mediation, at least in my experience, is that we start to form judgments that this person is lying, or this person is being unreasonable, or this person is just wrong. And in the US, evaluation is a big part of mediation. So I'm expected to do some reality testing and so on, and often give opinions about legal merits and so on. And that can often interfere with my neutrality. And what I found is that the more successful mediations are the ones where I've really been able to put aside my judgments about reasonableness or participation in good faith or all these other things. And even if it's a real crook on the other side, to maintain my neutrality and really try to understand where they're coming from and what their interests are. And that's not easy. I have to confess that is something that I struggle with. And I've been kind of trying to teach myself over the years. But the more I'm able to get back to that neutral position, I think the better the outcome is ultimately.
Look, I tell you, the whole concept of neutrality by itself can be discussed whether you have to be neutral or not. As actually, so that's a whole discussion. Once we'll have a discussion. We'll get Ken Cloak into that. He also has his views on the fact that you don't have to be neutral. So he has that.
Oh, is that right?
Another interesting thing, which is in this opening, the keynote speech that he was giving in the symposium, he was the keynote speaker. So interesting thing about, you don't have to be impartial. You have to be omnipartial.
Oh, I see. Okay, so that might be a different way of saying pretty much the same thing.
For that, and for neutrality, he has separately, he said that aspect about it. So that part of it, these are all, I mean, at times, like I said, these are all words that people keep using and discussing and debating. I'm just saying that the person you are, you take that person with you. Now, another thing that came up in my discussions and whatever I noticed was spirituality. I noticed that spirituality also had some role to play. So I started this whole series of mediators, mediation, and spirituality. Had a few sessions of that. So I felt there was a connection there also. So those are things which are more important to look at. The larger whole as a person. Now these little things and all will all fall into place if you take that from that angle. So, I mean, there is, I just the way I look at it. I mean, you people have obviously, I'm sure, studied a lot more. I don't read books, which I keep telling people everywhere. So I don't read books. So that part of it is out. So I don't have that theory behind me.
But there clearly are, there's a big overlap between the mediation community and the spirituality community, for sure, right? So one of my mediation teachers from a long time ago, Gary Friedman, who you may know, often teaches his course with a Buddhist monk, So I think you're right. There's a big overlap. There's a big connection between mediation and spirituality. I confess I'm not a hugely spiritual person. So maybe I'm a counterexample there.
No, Hiro, the point was, when we started that series, first question was, what do you think is spirituality? So everyone from various parts of the world spoke about what they thought was spirituality. And there is no such one common answer to that. So your concept of wanting to fit into some definition of spirituality is wrong. The spirituality that you have, maybe there is no word for that yet. No one has been able to explain that. You'll bring in your concept. So it is not that there is one little box and you have to fit into that. Spirituality is a much wider concept where you are part of it. I mean, you will obviously not even know. How do you put words? Like I said, these are things that you are as a person. To put words to yourself and say, this is the kind of person I am, this is exactly what I think like this. You won't be able to do it. How will you be able to do it? Maybe someone else might be able to put some words to you. Maybe your family or people around you, whatever. They might put, okay, hero this, hero that. Those are just very, very superficial aspect of it. There is that hero inside that maybe you also don't know. But it comes out, but it'll come out. Like for me, the hero that came out in, say, listening to your webinar is for me hero. For someone else, something else might have come out from you.
Yes.
So I don't think we should even question that aspect of ourselves. We just have to be us. This was like somewhere last year, this person from Nigeria had this, he said this, meet the mediator kind of thing, he called me. Again, just wanting to hear about the same thing, traits of a mediator and all that. All I said was, just be yourself. That's it. That's the trait you need. Just be yourself. And if you have the mindset, things will work out. If you don't have the mindset, definitely it won't. But just be yourself. Don't try to become something, because it is something which happens on those fraction of a second. Human interaction is on that fraction of a second. For me to question that fraction of a second and to go back into theory, or even if you might have reflected on things, but at that moment you can't reflect. That is a subconscious thing which can happen, but you can't reflect. It has to flow the way it has to flow. So for me, everything is about being yourself and just letting it flow. And it'll all come out. If that's a person what you are, or whatever it might be, let it flow. I mean, that's the way I look at it. I mean, that's why questioning yourself would be the worst thing to do, because how do you question something that you don't know about? Or how do you?
Maybe the process of questioning will just help you discover that, right?
That subconscious mind is there for that. It's doing it to yourself every moment. Right now also it's doing it to you. But for us, I was telling someone about this whole concept about this as people. Okay, let's use the word quantum computing. The human brain, we don't know what level of computing it is at. Let's just say quantum computing. So there is a quantum computer up there. It is working, doing all kinds of calculations. You're looking at me, the way I talk, the way everything around me, looking at Prabhat there, everything, all that is being calculated somewhere. You don't have to do it. It's all happening, and that quantum computer is doing it. Now, the output of that quantum computer, either we let it flow, whatever comes out, because it has done its calculations, or we think that we will take the calculations of a quantum computer and take it into a calculator in a hand and let us first see whether the answer is correct or not. Will we be able to do it? That's a quantum computer. It's done it and so on. So if we start questioning what comes out, the output that comes out, we are not even equipped for it as our conscious mind. Our conscious mind is so limited in that level. So that's why I'm saying, if that whatever reflection and everything has to happen, it's being done in that whole calculation is already happening. So next output that comes out from you will have taken care of that. But if I start thinking right now and go back and answer, now I have to reflect on this part in a whole transaction. Forget mediation. Just the fact that both of us are talking to each other, that in this transaction itself, there is so much that is actually happening behind the scenes. There are things that from your own self you might have already corrected. If you felt that there was the way you spoke or the way you conducted yourself, no, this was not right. It's all, you would change it for the next time. It'll happen on its own. For you to tell yourself that I will now change this because I did that, then it's not going to work. It's going to happen automatically, or it's not going to happen. That's the way I look at it. I mean, that's how I look at it. Just trust your quantum computer. That's the way just trust it. It'll do the best for you, and it'll do the best for the people around you also.
Yeah. Good.
Maybe these are things which I think you have to be experienced. I think maybe that's how I look at it. I mean, for me to say these things to you and you actually experience it, to be in that moment and not thinking about the next word you're going to say. It's not that everyone can do that, because everyone wants to come out as, okay, this is the way I should speak, and this is the way people expect me to speak, and all that. Even the words, I mean, forget the actions, just the word. People, if you're calculating, I see a lot of when people are talking. That means you're thinking about it. That means what that quantum computer, the output it's giving you, you're questioning it. Are you equipped to question it? It's giving you that flow. Then, or are you being yourself? That means you're not being yourself. Is that yourself, first of all? That self said, talk to Hiro, let it flow. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not thinking that how Hiro is going to gauge me, how he's going to judge me. If he doesn't, the way he doesn't like me, he doesn't like me. But he should know me first. He should know me first, not the way I should put myself across. Okay, Hiro, this is the way I am. I speak like this, and this is now you accept me. No, I don't want that. I mean, I may be myself, you be yourself, and if it works out, we like each other, damn good. But to start with, to have Hiro sitting here is because I've gauged you. I've seen this is a good human being, and I should talk to him. That's all that is required. After that, the conversations can go wherever.
Yeah. Well, I'm flattered that you made that determination about me, and I mean, I'm glad to tell you, anything else that I can. Is there something else?
Look, I would prefer to obviously go into life in general, how you grew up and the circumstances you grew up in, because I'm trying to a hybrid model. I want to make it in conversation with a beautiful mind and evolution of a mediator, but I don't want to push you. I don't want to push you so much, because I said age is a factor. You might not want to talk about a lot of things, but if you want to take us through how you were growing up and where you grew up and life in general as you grew up, you totally up to you. I mean, I'm not going to ask any specific questions, because some things I will tell you, it's not something that you might want to talk about. So I won't go into any specifics.
So we can do a little bit of that. I'm going to have to log off in about 25 minutes or so, but we can start that process. So I grew up in New York City. in the 1970s, which was maybe not the best time to be living in New York City. There was lots of crime, and it was not a very pleasant place, actually, when I was growing up. So I always had this urge that I wanted to leave the city as soon as I could. My parents were immigrants. They both came from Japan, although my mom, as you know, is half Indian. And so I had the kind of immigrant experience. I was the first generation born in the US. It was just myself and my parents, so I'm an only child. And we grew up, I grew up in New York City, very detached really from the rest of my extended family because they were all abroad. I went to an international school in New York, so I had a very kind of international upbringing. As you know, my family was kind of scattered all around the world, so we would spend summers traveling and meeting up with them in Japan or in other parts of Asia or Europe. And what else can I say?
But your parents came in here. They already married when they came out. They met here.
Well, they actually met in the US. They were both working for a Japanese company. So that's unusual, actually, because most immigrant families were married in, abroad, and they kind of came to the US and started their lives in the US. My parents actually came from Japan separately. And it's interesting because they both came to the US because they were, in a sense, fleeing Japan. They did not like growing up in Japan. They grew up during the war period, so that was a very traumatic period for them. My mom, as you know, is half Indian, and so she always felt a lot of racism in Japan, and she didn't feel like she fit in. My dad was Protestant, so you can imagine during the war, his entire family was stigmatized and really had an awful period during the wartime. So he always kind of felt that he did not belong in Japan either. And so the two of them kind of escaped that and came to the US. And so I guess that's part of a theme, I think, maybe in my upbringing, is sort of feeling that you are part of a society, but also not part of it, right? And I think that definitely is where this being able to see both sides fits in for me, right? I'm partly Indian, but I'm also partly Japanese. I'm partly American, but I really don't feel American in another level. And I think I inherited this a little bit from my parents. Another thing for me is that I'm gay. And this is a process. It was a process of kind of coming to terms with that identity in my adolescent years. And that's actually a difficult process because when you're a child, you're told certain things about what your life will look like, right? You'll get married, you'll have children, you'll do this. And then when you realize that your gender identity is not, or your sexual orientation is not what you have been told to expect of your evolution as a person, you start this process of internal questioning. Who am I? Where do I fit in? And this is, I think, part of what my parents actually were going through when they were in Japan still. I'm a Christian, but how do I fit into the rest of society and what the expectations of that society are? I'm part Indian. How do I really fit into this largely traditional Japanese society? And so, that also, I think, contributed to my ability to see things from both sides, right? Because you're told that your life is going to be like this, right? And you're told that certain things are good and certain things are bad. And then you realize certain things about yourself and you say, well, hang on, is that really true, what I've been told, right? No. Is that really what my life path is going to be? And nowadays it's very easy to come out, I think, or much comparatively easier to come out as gay, right? there's much more social acceptance, but back then there wasn't. And so it really was a process of me kind of understanding a completely different worldview, a completely different life path, and kind of holding those two things, what I was told growing up and what I felt I had to do with my life, seeing those two different perspectives and holding those two truths, you know. And so that, I think, also contributed to my, what we're calling as neutral identity, this ability to see, you know, both sides.
But you know, between that period, one is to discover that whatever sexual orientation and all that, discovering it, and today, of course, you're comfortable with talking about it and all that. So between that period, what did you go through? That would have been something which was very challenging for you, to grow up in a society where maybe you could not even speak about what you were feeling about.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, it wasn't. I mean, part of the problem was that I inhabit these different circles, right? So with my Western friends and people who were more open to the idea of being gay, I felt very comfortable. But then when I came home and I was in more of an Asian mindset, or when I was with relatives who were not from a very Western mindset, it's a very different, you know, environment. And so, yeah, there were lots of struggles around that, and navigating different points of view, and really having to understand that even though I might have a point of view about my identity, and that was accepted in certain circumstances and certain other circles, in my family circles, you know, I had to really kind of navigate that very carefully. And there were certain things that I could say and certain things that I couldn't say. And, you know, it was, you know, my Western friends would always say, well, why don't you just, you know, come out to everyone and kind of wave your rainbow flag and be more vocal about these things. But then you realize that, well, that might be appropriate for certain environments, but in other environments, you know, it's not. And so to be able to have that cultural sensitivity, I think, and to be able to see that there's two sides of every coin, you know, I think I honed a lot of those skills with those life experiences.
It must have been difficult for you, but it must have been, I mean, I'm sure what you went through is not something you can even, I'm sure, like I said, you can't explain a lot of things what you go through, but it must have been a tough period for you, because you're living a life which is something which is not you in a certain, like even in that, with the Asian relatives, you're living a life, you're talking about things, but you want to say something else, but you can't say it. Must be really tough. That must be a very difficult thing.
Yeah. You know, it was very uncomfortable. And part of it was that, you know, my parents were very uncomfortable with it too, right? And so it took them a long time to kind of speak more openly about it. But it does, I think, really, it puts you in this situation where you really have to kind of navigate very different mindsets about a particular issue. And learn to live with some compromise, really. And that's a lot, I think, of what we do as mediators as well. We try to kind of encourage a compromising mindset. You know, you can't have everything you want, but can you move this far to reach some kind of an agreement? You know.
But today you're not compromising, are you, in terms of your thought process and everything?
Again, I think it really depends on the sphere that you're operating in, right? You know, it's very difficult to say that we have just one identity that spans all the different spheres that we move in. I have a personal sphere, I have a professional sphere, I have, you know, extended relative sphere, I have the sphere that I occupy when I travel abroad to certain countries, where they have very different views about homosexuality, right? So I do a lot of development work and consulting work around ADR reform in certain countries where there are laws against homosexuality, right? And so can I be open in certain contexts here in the US, professionally and personally? Yes, for sure. Much more so than 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But am I still kind of closeted in other contexts? I think I have to be, you know, and I think part of part of the reality, I think, of having a complex identity and having different facets to my identity is to realize that you can't just have one identical identity throughout all these spheres that you operate in, if that makes sense.
No, I know, I understand, because a lot of people have that. Because I'm saying, you, of course, you're talking about sexual orientation. I'm talking about, there was a particular arbitrator mediator. I wanted him to come to Evolution of a Mediator. He said, look, as an arbitrator, I have to portray myself as a certain person. If I talk about myself, I think people might not, because they need to, I have to be here. I can't be there. So they should not know everything about me. I found that quite interesting, that you can't be yourself. So that for me, look, that's something that I don't understand, because I just feel people should be accept you as what you are. In whatever sphere that you are in, they'll accept you what you are. But I do understand that maybe it is difficult for people. They think they might not. So just because a person is vulnerable and he talks about himself, it's not that he will stop being an arbitrator for them. I don't think so, but he feels they might not. And this is a very, very well-known arbitrator mediator. So people have that feeling in that. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know.
Yeah. It could be. But I think this applies to any type of identity, right? So my kind of Western identity, American-based identity, is not really something that I carry into when I speak with my parents, for example. The words that I use, even the way I talk, the accent that I have, is not the same when I speak to my parents, right? We often kind of mix Japanese and English. It's it really is a changing of frame. And so I think this idea that we have one identity that cuts across all of our different spheres of interaction, I guess I would push back against that, because I think certainly in my experience, there are different aspects of my identity that come to the fore in different spheres that I operate in.
Okay. Well, maybe in a sense, we have so much about us that one particular sphere that you are in, only that part is required for you to come out. In another sphere, something else might. But as a whole, you are that whole. It's not that you are wanting to be someone else in that sphere. So it's just various parts of you which is coming out in those spheres. One is a person who is becoming someone else in that sphere because he thinks in that sphere, this is the way I'll fit in. So I think that I want to distinguish between.
Yeah. I mean, is it about fitting in, or is it about just what's appropriate for the different sphere that you're in, right? That I don't know. But I do think that identity is a complicated thing, right? And I think there's a lot of adaptation that happens depending on what mode and what sphere you're in.
But the way I look at it is that, look, when you're with your parents, you're comfortable, be it talking Japanese or English or mix of them, you're comfortable in that. Similarly, if you're sitting with friends in a bar and you're talking about things, you're comfortable in that. So you're not changing anything about you. So that's perfect. That's various parts of you. One is just to fit in with those friends, and you have to talk in a certain way just because they will accept you in that sense. That I don't know whether that's your identity. That's your created identity, but that's whether that's you as a person. That is something which there'll be a conflict there, I think. But otherwise, if you were like that, it's perfectly all right. I mean, you like what you're talking to be like is not what you talk to someone else like. Everyone will have a different conversation in a different way. Definitely, you can have a standard you. There's a lot about you. It's not we can't put it to one. But as long as you are being yourself while you're here, that's all that matters, according to me. And you are with wherever else you are yourself. You're not creating something around yourself here that just because I am talking to Vikram, I should be portraying myself in this manner. If you're not doing that, then this is you. And that you is going to be different in some other sphere that you are in. So I think that's the way I look at it. I mean, that's so basically then, okay, now this is like growing up in New York. And in terms, look, I tell you, when you said some kind of connection between all the people who came into the show, Evolution of a Mediator I'm talking about, was the kind of friends they had when they were younger, and the people, very diverse group. A lot of them had a very diverse group as people around them. Was that something that you grew up with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I went to an international school, so my friends were from, lots of different countries. I don't think I had an American friend actually when I was growing up. They were all a lot of the kids who went to my school were UN diplomats' kids.
Mhm.
So, I had friends from Kenya, from Malaysia, from India, from Pakistan, from Europe. So I was exposed to a lot of different, worldviews and perspectives very early on. My relatives were from different countries and from different cultures as well. So every time we would, go and visit them, I had to immerse myself in a different mindset and culture and so on. And so I definitely had that kind of breadth of exposure, I would say, to different ways of thinking and different attitudes.
But that is definitely important. I think that's an important part of the whole that we are talking about as a could be as a mediator, or I think otherwise. I think those are very important parts. I mean, to be able to actually not just interact, but becoming part of their lives. And maybe, I don't know, but was there family interaction with these people? Did you actually go to their houses, and was that kind of interaction happening?
Yeah. So, one of my friends, very good friends, was Indian. And I, at the time, was very interested in Indian cooking and cooking Indian food. And so I was often invited to their home for pujas and for, meals and so on. And so, yeah, we're still very close family friends, actually, after many, many decades. So that was always very nice.
But what did you end up cooking? What did you learn?
Samosas, curries, chana. Actually, my friend's mom was a very, very good cook. So I learned a lot of interesting tips from her about Indian cooking.
But which part of India were they from?
So they're from West Bengal.
Okay. So some interesting fish curries did you get?
That I didn't learn, actually, but lots of other recipes. Yeah, so those were the closest family friends, I would say. We had another family friend from Bangladesh. So we went over to their house quite a bit, and we're still very good friends with them.
But what about your parents? I mean, were they, what kind of work or whatever, what were they doing?
Yeah, so my mom was a housewife.
Mhm.
So she stayed at home. My dad had his own business. So he did a lot of import-export work between Japan and the US. So he was constantly traveling back and forth. Yeah.
But where all were you traveling? I mean, do you remember your travel during when you were younger? Where all did you go? Some experiences there?
Yeah, so we would go to Japan quite often. So almost every summer we went to Japan. We also had lots of Indian relatives in the UK. So I went to the UK quite often as a child. The Caribbean, we had relatives as well, Jamaica, St. Martin. So I have lots of fond memories from my adolescence, especially going to those Caribbean islands and really meeting this whole bevy of Indian relatives, in the Caribbean, which again is kind of a cognitive dissonance. You're going to the Caribbean, but you're eating samosas and doing pujas and things with Indian relatives. The other thing that we discovered when I was in graduate school, so I was studying in the UK before I went to law school, and many of my Indian relatives are in the UK, and I was asked whether my mom was still in touch with her sister. And I said, my mother doesn't have a sister. And they said, well, actually she does. And it turned out that my grandfather had a daughter in India before he moved to Japan.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was kind of, I guess, a taboo or a family secret that really, I certainly didn't know about. And it turned out that my mom didn't really know about it. I think she had some idea maybe, but she didn't really know the full details. It turned out that other relatives did know, but had just not said anything about it. And so it turned out that my mom had a half-sister who's fully Indian, who of all places lived in the Canary Islands, which is in Spain. It's off the coast of, it's off the coast of Morocco.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of, I think, bitterness and trauma around the fact that, you know, my grandfather had abandoned them and married, you know, my grandmother and moved to Japan and all this stuff. And so I think they were very reluctant, probably for the first, you know, several decades that I was, you know, of my life at least, you know, getting in touch with us. But finally, there was an overture and there was an opening really to make this connection. And for whatever reason, the half sister, contacted me first, because I was in the UK at that point.
But how did she manage that? I mean, how did she get to know?
It was through, so it was my aunt who was in London at the time, and I was seeing her quite often when I would, you know, when I was visiting, and she was the one who said, "Does your mom know about, you know, your sister, or is she in touch with your sister?" And I said, "We don't have a sister." And she, "Yes, you do." And so I said, "Well, I would be very interested in meeting her and you know, communicating with her." And several months later, I got this call from the half sister. So there again, I was kind of the middleman, right? I was the mediator between this half sister and my mother, and I kind of brought them together. And then several years later, we met the entire family. We went to Tenerife, which is in the Canary Islands. And we are very close now. They're the closest relatives, actually, to me at this point, much more than my Japanese, you know, side. And you know, the interesting, huh?
For your mother also, it must have been a very good thing to be able to.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was very good for both sides. And you know, the interesting thing is, you know, we go to Spain. We go to Spain to see our Indian relatives who speak Spanish. Right? We don't communicate with them in Hindi or Sindhi. We communicate with them in English, I guess. But you know, English is not their first language. Spanish is their first language, but they're Indian, but they live in Spain. I mean, you know, this is the kind of
cross-cultural connection,
cultural, yeah, context that, you know, I operate in. So, yeah, and actually, we are actually more in touch with our Indian relatives than with our Japanese relatives. Partly it's because many of the Japanese relatives have passed away at this point. But also, I don't know why, but we just are closer. I have another Indian cousin. These are all kind of second, third cousins kind of thing. But we're, you know, the Indian networks are so, you know, broad anyway. Yeah. But he was born in Peru, and he lived most of his adult life in St. Martin, which is an island in the Caribbean. You know, and it turns out that now he's marrying someone who is from California originally. So they're coming out to California for the wedding. And so we're going to the wedding in California, and they'll be going back to the Caribbean afterwards. You know, again, his first language is Spanish, you know.
I think, Hiro, you need to document all this. This entire tree, you need to make this very interesting tree to be.
Well, you know, at one point I did have the interest in writing some kind of family history because, you know, in the 1920s and 30s, when my grandfather was in Japan, there was only really a handful of Indians who were in the particular city that they were located in. It was just a block of, you know, Indian families where we lived or where my mom grew up. And, you know, it's a fascinating kind of melange of cultures. And most of the Indian families were, you know, husband and wife were Indian. But our family and maybe a handful of others were mixed, you know, and that was, I think, quite rare. And for that time, I think it was very forward-looking of my grandmother's family, a very traditional, you know, Japanese family, to embrace this very dark-skinned man who came from, you know, halfway around the world.
But why did he go there? Why did he move to Japan?
A business mainly. So he was a merchant, and I think originally he was stationed in Japan for this company. It was an Indian company that he was working with. And then I think he just decided he wanted to stay. I think he was maybe asked to come back to India or something, and he just decided he wanted to stay. I don't know how he met my grandmother. I don't know what that story is. but he eventually fell in love, I guess. They got married. He spoke Japanese as far as I recall, but in the beginning, I'm sure he didn't. So I often wonder sort of what the interaction was with my grandmother, who did not speak any English and certainly didn't speak any Indian languages. But there again, there was this navigation of different cultures between them. They had to have done that.
No, but today also, is there a lot of cross-cultural? I mean, Japanese, are they still very closed in terms of as a community, or are they still opening out and a lot of cross-cultural marriages are happening?
More so now than before. Yeah, I'm sure.
But
I'm
is
sure.
Is it quite a bit? Because I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think Japan is still, comparatively speaking, more heterogeneous than other cultures. I think that's for sure. But, about 4 years ago, the winner of the Miss Japan contest was half Indian, half Japanese.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting.
So I think that's a sign that, times have changed. Naomi Osaka, who is that famous women's tennis player who you may know, she's half Haitian and half Japanese, So I think things are changing, but it's still nowhere near as diverse, I think, as India or the US.
But I don't know, because I don't know whether good or bad, because obviously there is a culture that gets retained because of that, so which is also sometimes good that the culture gets retained. It should not become this one world culture that is coming out. At least every community retains that aspect because of that. So I mean, I think it's good and bad both ways, because if you don't open out to the world, that is also not very good. So I think that balance of it has to be maintained. Don't lose your culture, but still merge with everyone else. If that can happen.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, definitely, it's sad if you lose some cultural aspects, but I think melange, exchange, mixing of cultures and races and people. I think that's a good thing, right? And I think that's what the future will hold.
But everyone is able to retain what they have but still merge with the larger whole. I think that because Donald was on the show, the last one, I think. Yeah, last one. He was one of the youngest senators in Kansas State. And then of course, he had a 1 year period. Then he got elected for another 4 years, and then he lost. And he told his wife, who was from Sri Lanka, but she was based in Australia, he said, if I lose this election, I'm moving to Australia. So he's moved to Australia. So of course, I mean, I don't like to use this word African American, but he's an African American. So he was talking about this aspect about the US, that everyone has their identities. So the African Americans, they were doing whatever, the Italians, everyone, but still part of the whole. As an American, I think that there is some kind of a concept that you have, which India also does have. That I was telling him that unity in diversity. I mean, it is so diverse. The country is so diverse, but there is something that connects us together. So I think maybe that's a good thing. No one should
and even if we don't have one thing that connects us, we have to find some unity through diversity, right? Just because we disagree doesn't mean we can't agree to disagree.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of what we do in mediation, right? We say you can settle even if you disagree, right? You can agree even if you disagree. And part of the challenge is to, even if we don't have things in common, to find bridges and to find connections so that we can.
But what I was saying, what I was telling him was that, does it so happen that because you create your own identity so much that you can't merge with the larger whole? That might become a problem. That is, if you want to keep. I mean, so I'm saying this whole. I was coming from this whole usage of African American. I said, I mean, you're all Americans, aren't you? So should you be using that? So, but he said, no. We like to create. We like it. We want that identity because of our whatever our history as our whatever level people came in, and we want that identity also. So I just felt, does it work against you in some situations? Because if you don't only want to create that identity and keep it away from the whole, is that good or not? So I think there was a discussion. I mean, it's not something that you have to conclude at that point. But I just feel that sometimes an identity, does it go against the concept of being part of a larger whole?
Well, I think we all have to find our place in the whole, right? We don't just want to merge with the whole and be identityless, right? I think the tension is always to be able to say, I'm part of this group, or I'm willing to live with this group, but this is what makes me distinct, as well.
And I think that's it's a mutual respect. I think everyone mutually respects that. I think that's the way it should be. No one is trying to impose their cultural aspect on the other, accepting the other's differences. It could be the way you speak, the way even lingo. I mean, someone was talking about some mediator in the US only is talking about that the African Americans have their own lingo, which everyone doesn't understand. So you create that identity there, but it should not be such that it excludes everyone. So do you create those to separate yourself from them, or you want to create it for your own self? I mean, it's a very it's a whole discussion by itself, Hiro. That's I think we'll have to make that a larger discussion.
Yeah.
There is so much in that. I think that whole, I mean, just the interaction part of it, there is a lot of complexities to it, but it can be very simple also.
Yes.
Let everyone be and accept them for what they are, which is from the whole concept of you being gay. That aspect also, just let him be what he is, but accept him for what he is. You don't have to get into some specific, he's like this, so I will not talk to him or whatever. So to be able to accept people for whatever they are. I mean, gay orientation, that is just one aspect of it. Which part of the world you come from becomes another thing. What language you speak, how you speak it. I mean, that's another thing, but you can discriminate against it or accept it as being that person. I think there is a lot that I think we need to, but how many people are conscious about it or sensitive about it? I think that is where the issue lies, and where I don't even blame them, because you grew up in a society where maybe those are the things which are not what are discussed. It is not, being sensitive is not discussed. I don't see that.
So I'm curious, do you see any similarities in my kind of brief life story with the other?
I'm not supposed to discuss this. I'm not supposed to discuss this. Like I said, if I discuss it, then I'm actually in whatever way. I'm saying that it's out there. I see the similarity. I see the similarity. That's why I was saying, that's why I wanted you to be part of that. But like I said, it is the age factor. I have to get out so much more from you, which I think you were ready for. I think that way I did not know whether you'll be ready for talking about a lot of things, but that way at least you were there. You're ready. So Prabhat also, I think, he's got a little bored sitting there, because that's the way format. I tell you, Prabhat, that's the way it is. It is because I'm telling you, if it was only in conversation with a beautiful mind, it could have been a larger conversation. But because there is so much more to take out from Hiro, I think that is why it becomes a kind of a
not bored at all. It was so engaging and so involving. I've just written a little note on the chat, so that expresses what I feel. Yeah.
No, because I tell you what I did when Prabhat was talking to you, I had to write to him that please, because what happens with him is he does like to give the larger picture, but what happens is his larger picture becomes a lot about things which we have to talk to Hiro. So I had to tell him, look, just keep your comment a little shorter, because I'll have to have him on the show, because he has so much to talk about that I think I need to have him there. So I think, because that is the thing that happens normally, but the format part of it, for a lot of people, this was not something didn't start off as other people coming into the conversation. It started off only me and the other person. That's it. Because it was not.
But it's nice to have someone
else. That's why I left a little chat, left a little note just now in the chat. Yeah.
Yes. So what happened? I tell you what happens is, it's nice. I actually felt, yes, it is nice to have other people, but in conversation with a beautiful mind. In evolution of Mediator, what I found is that people get bored, because I'm only interested in the person's life, every little thing, and getting into. Sometimes I used to see comments there. Why are you talking so much about his childhood? Because I want to know about the childhood. I see something important there. So people get bored. So slowly I realized that people can watch it on YouTube. And see it in the breaks, because everyone can't. The longest one with Andrew Miller, he went on for about 4 hours, 3 minutes without a break. There's no break. Then with Lisa was there, that record was broken, went to 4 hours, 7 minutes without a break. So if that everyone cannot sit through those, but
Yes.
because I'm interested in your life, I'm getting into certain things the way I'm looking at it,
Yeah.
maybe the direction that I'm going in, but everyone else is not looking at it that way. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I think there's some value to looking at, whether your early childhood experiences shape you as a person or as a mediator or something like that. But I guess, my concern would just be to not put too much stock in that, because I think there are other things that happen later in life also
there's
that can
we have
influence.
enough time. I told you, I've done 4 episodes with Ken Cloak. So it took
Mm.
4 episodes to go there. I told him very clearly, it's not, there's no hurry. We'll take as many episodes as required,
Right.
but we'll get into every aspect. So
Yeah.
because it's someone's life story. I mean, it's that many
Yeah.
years of life to be, first of all, to be able to recollect a lot of things, definitely. But there are certain experiences you remember. They just have to be brought out. And in a normal discussion, you'll just go over it. Okay, this, I was in school, I was this. No, but if you just stop for a second and think about it, there are those
Mm.
important moments of your life which today we have not been able to cover. There's lots more that you have to tell us, but I'm saying that there is lots more that makes a person. And it is, I think, is very nice to bring it out. Why was I wanting to bring it out, even this In Conversation with Beautiful Mind? Because these are special people. I mean, people do not maybe value it right now, but
Mm.
mediators are special people, and you have to be able to take them as that. Everyone is not like that. Everyone, I mean, it's you, like you as a person think that no, everyone must be like me. It's not like that. The way
Mm.
you think, the way you look at situations, the way you look at interaction between people is very different. So don't even
Mhm.
think that everyone is like that. It comes naturally to you. The only difference is it comes naturally to you. You cannot
Well,
put it.
yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean,
That's
I
why.
think you're probably right that it comes harder to some people than others. And, frankly, I'm not sure how good a mediator I am ultimately. I mean, the jury's still out on that. I'm constantly trying to improve as a mediator every time I do a mediation. So, it's a long path. It's a never ending path, I think.
All I can say, Hiro, is don't question yourself. Just be the good human being you are. Everything else is okay around it. The moment you think about it, you how do you question that part of yourself? How you can't even
Well, I think you
question.
have you. I think you have to keep questioning yourself. I think so that to me is a really important part of professional growth and personal growth, but also the mediator's growth. Because again, as we talked about before, it's a very solitary profession, right? And you don't have another, unless you're doing co-mediation, you don't have someone else saying, hey, when you said that was really bad, or you could have done this differently, or you're not getting this feedback constantly, as you would maybe if you're on a team of lawyers representing a client, and so on, right? So I think, to me, so some people tell me that I question myself too much, that I'm too hard on myself, because I will often come back from an arbitration or mediation and say, gosh, did I make the right decision there? Or was that the best idea that I put out? Or when I did this, what, should I have done that differently? And I constantly kind of go over this and reprocess, right?
But
And
but
people tell me, don't do this to yourself, right? This is crazy. And I see that there's some validity to that point, but I also think that that's kind of what makes me a good at what I do, or reasonably good at what I do.
But Hiro, leave it to the quantum computer. The quantum computer is checking everything out, is giving you the output. It is
I
changing
don't have
whether
as much faith as you in the quantum
I'm
computer.
telling you, have the faith. That's the one that's working. That's the one that's working. It's just that some part of that output you are able to sit and
Yeah.
discuss right now. But there is so much more which is already happening. Let's let it flow naturally. Everything is being. Look, the point is that today, if you sit, so say a certain mediation that you do, and you want to dissect it.
Yeah.
When I said this, did I? Was that the way I should have said it, or whatever? But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can only question something that you have taken back from it, because that particular sentence that you use, the way you said it, you can only question that. But that overall experience, which was a lot of other things happening at the same time, you are
Yes.
not bringing that back with you to question. So it could have been totally something else which worked or did not work. But because you yourself are observing, I mean, you're not even observing. I mean, you are only looking back. Because at that point of time, you can also not observe yourself. It is only you're only looking back at yourself in that particular. Okay, imagine I'm sitting there. This is what I did. So you're looking back at that, but that moment of yours, when it was happening, there were 50,000 other things happening with it, but you could not bring that back.
That's true. And sometimes you look beyond just that micro event that you're concerned about. But sometimes it's also helpful just to, rehash something that happened. And then sometimes you reach the conclusion that actually that was the best thing to have been done at that point.
Exactly.
And that also is helpful because I replayed the tape. And then I realized that computer, the quantum computer that you were talking about, that was correct.
Exactly.
But being conscious of that is also helpful, right? Because then I was able to replay the tape and be confident on a conscious level that actually that was good.
So what you do is have faith in the quantum computer for the next 1 week. Just have that. We'll have a conversation after that, and then you see whether it worked for you or not.
I don't think I'll ever have that faith, honestly. I mean, but that's I think part of what makes me who I am. That's part of my identity. I think is someone who not just questions the person I'm interacting with, but is questioning myself. And some people might say, well, that means that you're a self-doubter and that shows weakness of will or something like that. I see it kind of as a strength in a way, because I'm never assuming that I'm right. I'm always questioning and trying to be vigilant about that.
No, but I think certain things in terms of questioning, the only thing I feel wherever questioning has to happen, there are certain points of time. It could be based on morality. There's certain points of time in morality where you have to question yourself, because that quantum computer might not be, that aspect may be something that has to be done by you consciously, because the output that you might get is based on maybe other factors, maybe whatever that is. But I think morality is something which we need to bring out as an area where question conscience. So conscience has to act, I think, separately. So the quantum computing is happening there, but the conscience has to go through that conscience. So whether you have to consciously get your conscience in between, or it is working on its own, that part of it, I think that maybe we'll have to see. But that definitely, sometimes you have to, the output, you have to sometimes question that part, and maybe not do something because the morality of it or the conscience doesn't come into the picture, comes into the picture or something like that. Or those areas I do believe that yes, we should not let that output take us wherever it wants to take us. Could be, definitely. But otherwise, I think most of it in terms of our interaction, people, I think it gives us, the kind of the right output. We could not have come out with better. But over time, yes, the next time maybe we've learned something. It was the output it might give. It might be better in that sense. It has self-improvement, the whole machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of thing. So there is something there, machine learning there also. So it's learning from everything. But I think it's learning on its own. I think to be able to code it on every point of time, and like you have to question the code, I think that might become too difficult. A thought.
Yeah. It's a good thought. So, Vic, unfortunately, I'm going to have to run soon because I've got another appointment.
But I'm not going to make it very easy for you. I'm still saying, come on a session on the symposium. It'll be interesting to hear your views on mediation in our culture and traditions. I think it'll be an important thing. It'll be good to hear you. It can be in September. We have enough time. It can be in September sometime. I'm sure you can take out some time.
Okay, so let's continue to talk about that.
Yeah. But otherwise now, we haven't really gone through. That means we need another conversation. We'll go through more about your life. It'll be interesting. We can have a conversation. But otherwise, then after that, I mean, you've grown up. I mean, you did your education in the UK, then you came back.
I did. So I studied philosophy as an undergraduate.
Wow.
So that I think is also something that Ken Cloak did. I think that's a similarity that we have. That also is a very reflective kind of discipline, right? Where you're always questioning and re-questioning and trying to see things from different perspectives. So I did graduate work in philosophy, and then decided that was not really my my professional calling. I was interested in it. It was engaging. It satisfied a certain craving during my kind of student years, but that professionally, I didn't really see myself as just an ivory tower philosopher. And so that's why I went to law school. And law, in a way, is kind of a practical version of philosophy, because I think a lot of what we do in crafting legal arguments is really to think about what the law is or should be on a theoretical level, and then apply it to the actual facts of the case. But at least there's some practical outlets where there's some practical outcome, of all of it. So.
But otherwise, I mean, you read all the philosophies of ancient times and all throughout. So you read all that. So what you have to do is one day maybe you'll have to take me through some of these books and all. Because like I said, I don't read, but I think I'm starting a new series on that. I'm starting a series where we're discussing books, and a person's thought of that book. I'll learn from that, and people can have that debate on the way whatever the author has put across. So that you can be part of one of those sessions. Let's see what book. Right now, what we're going to do is we start with Michael Lang. He's into reflective practice. So a book of his, we'll discuss that. And I told him that, look, we'll discuss it objectively, as long as you don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's that, okay, it's your book and we are saying this. He said, not at all. I'm perfectly all right with that. So we'll start with that. And let's see, because look, every author might not want to sit in a discussion and you talking about their book in a certain manner. So maybe everyone might not be able to do that. But let's start. Let's see. If the author comes in, it'll be nice. But if the author doesn't come in, okay. So the Michael Lang one, that you can be part of that discussion.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about that. So Vic, I really have to take off, unfortunately. It's
with me, you have to do that, because I'm telling you, with me, conversations can go very long. I told you, I'm definitely, everyone can't do that. 4 hours without a break, everyone can't do. It's not happening. So it was very nice, Hiro, very nice of you to take out time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Vic, for this opportunity.
It was really nice, and we definitely are going to have more of these conversations.
Okay, sounds good.